The first part was very personal. We go a bit further now, a bit more from the personal perspectives to the group and how to solve conflicts there. In most cases it comes to decision making. You need to make a decision. And we want to talk about what we think is important to consider to make decisions that do not result in conflicts. The third part will go even further then, and will show how to systematically avoid conflict. So this is about decisions, and we have the last part will be about project management. Okay, so with decision making, I will talk about disentangled federalism, just quickly what it is and why it's important to avoid conflict. Then something a specific method that's called minimum opposition voting or systemic consensus principle. And I will touch on how decision making can be supported by artificial intelligence. That's something that's more for the future, but I think interesting to hear what might come in the future. So disentangled federalism means transparency. That's one thing. So it's important that the information is available to everyone. It's not that it's hidden by some government or some manager or something, but the information is transparent. And another important point is that only the people who are affected and interested participate in decision making. So not some external person makes decisions for you, but if you are interested in something, or if you are affected by something, then it's you who should make the decision. Maybe not directly. Use of delegation is still important because you don't necessarily know everything, you don't want to be part of every decision, even if it's made, even if you are affected. But it's your thing then to say, I trust this person, or I trust this method, and you delegate something to a person, or maybe later to an AI. But the important thing is to do this bottom up, so you're in control and not the external person. And one more thing is to have it action-based as opposed to people-based. That means you want to decide on specific actions. You don't want to say, so that person can tell me what I need to do, or can say what I should do, or what I want. I know what I want, so I know which action might be good for me. For minimum opposition voting, I'd like to show a video. Okay, so that was a little introduction to minimum opposition voting or systemic consensus principle. There are a few things now that I just want to point out. In the video, they mainly talked about relative majorities, but we can show here that even absolute majorities can like easily not show what the group wants. And in the example here, we've got 3 movies, and actually we did something like this a few weeks ago at the presentation at C-Day, and we showed, we actually could see in action that the traditional majority voting would have led to a different result than what minimum opposition voting resulted in.
With the Zeitgeist movement, we hold monthly Movies That Matter every month, and what we do a minimum opposition vote to choose the movie. Mick was at the last one as well,
yeah.
And so we allow everyone to put down whatever movie or whatever they want shown, and then we use a minimum opposition vote to reach the outcome.
In this example, we have 3 movies, and we've got 7 people. And the 4 girls in this example want to see Dirty Dancing, so they vote for Dirty Dancing. Everyone has only 1 vote. That's traditional voting. Harry votes for Avatar, and Paul and Jim for Terminator. So in this case, the relative and absolute majority would be for Dirty Dancing. This is here below the traditional process, we see how it could look like with minimum opposition voting. What we see here, you've seen it in the video, I don't need to explain it in detail. We've got no opposition for Dirty Dancing from the 4 girls. But one thing that you can already see here is Susie would be happy to watch Avatar, like she has the same opposition. She doesn't really care, Avatar or Dirty Dancing. She can't do that with traditional voting. She can't say that with traditional voting. What we can also see here is that the boys are quite opposed to Dirty Dancing. So
for some reason.
It's just like, it's a fantasy example.
Seems a bit realistic.
It turns out that in this example, there is 28 opposition points for Dirty Dancing, 18 for Avatar, and 17 for Terminator. So in this example, Terminator would be the movie they would watch. There is no zero option in here. So the zero option would simply be to say, okay, we don't watch a movie together. It's just, it should be in there. Like a zero option should always be part of the decision making, because in many cases, keeping this status quo is actually worse than some of the alternatives that you decide on. So if you're a group, then maybe you discuss things to the end and you can't find a decision, but actually you could find out with this that it's the worst case to actually stay where you are. So it's better to implement something, to change something, than keep things as they are and just discuss. So it's a good idea to actually use the zero option to, or null suggestion, how they call it in the video. This 0 to 10, that might sound fairly difficult, like it sounds like it might be fairly complex and complicated and take a long time. And it can be, and you need a paper to write it down and everything. However, it shows a much clearer picture of what people really want, and thus avoids conflicts, because people would rather, like, are more happy with the decisions that are made. But there are simpler methods. So one thing that we used for the monthly movies is you can just have 0 to 2, 0, 1, or 2, and if you have no opposition, you stay like this and you don't write anything down. But if you have some opposition, then you put one hand up, and if you have more opposition, you put 2 hands up, and then simply all the hands are counted, and then you have an opposition value. Of course, it depends what it is. They said also maybe not everyone, like with some decisions, if there is a big potential for conflict, you don't want to show an exact insight in your mind, and with hands up, maybe you're not comfortable with putting your hands up. So it depends on the decision, but there are several degrees of efficiency and several degrees of anonymity that how you can use the minimum opposition voting. One more thing that I would like to point out is some people think that, okay, so if I want my thing to be voted for, my option to be voted for, and to be realized, I just say no to everything else, which means 0 opposition to to the thing that I want, and 10 opposition to everything else. But in this example here, we can see how that actually backfires. So we said we look at a chain, and chain's actual oppositions are 0, 6, 2, but she says, I want to watch Dirty Dancing. So she says 0, 10, 10 instead. But when you sum up the values later, it turns out that suddenly Avatar gets less opposition than Terminator. But if you look at her actual opposition values, you see that she would rather watch Terminator. So now she actually gets to see a movie that she did not want to watch. So it doesn't really make sense to try to cheat. Okay, then let's come to the support of artificial intelligence. This is a more theoretical topic, but it's interesting to see, and it gives some insights in what we actually want maybe. Voting is to give an opinion what you think is best for you. It does not necessarily say what is really best for you, just what you think is best for you. Why? You could have incomplete information. You might not have time to learn and analyze a problem in depth. Also, there might be manipulation. So someone could say, I know this is best for you because this and that, but actually they are trying to manipulate you. And also there is evidence for risk-averse thinking. I have just put in a link to a book chapter. You can't really see it, but a book chapter in a book about artificial intelligence, and there you would find the studies and the numbers that show how we actually do not make rational decisions. We make decisions that are safer than and not bring us the best possible result. So we rather take something that is not as good as we could have it, but we have it for sure. And the funny thing is, if you want to do more studies in there, you will see that depending on how questions are asked, something that can mean the same thing, just because the question is asked in a different way, it can turn out to have a different result. Yeah. So that the actual mathematical analysis is the same, but we perceive it differently. So those are reasons that, why we need to think: is there something better? Is there something that we could use instead, or at least as a support? Well, we have experts, we have delegates, and they can reduce the problem. They can reduce the mentioned problems, but the problems cannot be eliminated. So if there is an expert, they would study for years on a specific problem, so they would know more about it, or they would get the time to analyze a specific problem. It helps, but it only reduces the problems. And you get an additional problem, that is corruption. Generally, why decisions by artificial intelligence? Why can they help? They are unbiased, and one thing that a detailed problem that comes with it is it depends. Of course, it still depends on the programmer. It still depends how the artificial intelligence is designed, and it goes in very detail to talk about that. But generally speaking, it's unbiased. It's rational because it purely follows mathematical formulas and not some psychological perception. And it's fast. It's fast because it can specialize on a specific problem. It's specialized on the decision making of one process. There are still challenges. It's not like a solution that we can easily implement and we've got it there. We still have the incomplete information. Do we know all variables, or is data noisy? Noise in the data means that, for example, if you measure a distance with the sensor, for example, it can mean that it will show different distances, although the object does not move away from you. So it means that, with sensors and in the data, there is always some noise. Even when you do questionnaires, people would just say yes because they are bored. And so you cannot, there is always some uncertainty in measurements. And the question is also, are two situations the same? So you try to learn something about one situation, and then later you ask yourself, is this the same situation? Should I do the same thing, or is it something different? Is there something different? It's not that easy to say all the time. Also, computers have comparably poor analytical skills and little creativity, because our brain is just, it's so complex. We have so many different ways to analyze problems that with computers don't have. One thing is with this risk-averse thinking is it has brought us somewhere, so it has some reason to be in there. But and that, like, the brain is just analyzing many more things, but we can come, like, we can do something. Something that is now researched, for example, by CSIRO, is by using reinforcement learning. I will talk about what that is, what it includes. What it is used for now, what they try to do is to help make decisions for conservation projects. So they will analyze decisions and they will analyze actions and how the actions influenced, for example, the population of a certain species that is endangered. Or on the other hand, they use the same methods to eradicate diseases. What is it? Basically, you try an action and evaluate the result. There are rewards and penalties for performance, and this is an important point. This is what we rate. It's not the actions, it's the results. So it means for decision making, to get the best out for us, we should actually analyze the results of actions. We should not put too much emphasis on voting for a specific action if we do not know exactly what that action leads to. It's more important to analyze the result, and the result is measured in rewards and penalties. Like, you give the AI a reward if we are happier, for example. In business, it could mean you give the AI a reward if the profit is higher, or penalties the other way around. Then an important aspect is that the AI learns incrementally from evidence. That refers to the Bayesian, so that's just a scientific term for learning from evidence. So basically, actions that worked out well will be repeated again and again, and other actions will be dismissed. There is a lot of computation with probabilities. I won't mention how this works exactly, but it makes computation actually quite complex. And as well as the last chance that I mentioned here, there are delays between cue, action, and feedback. That means we get some information, that's the cue, then we analyze it, then we make a decision, or a robot, or an AI that makes decisions for us, or whatever. And then after some time we get feedback. And when we get the feedback, the challenge is, what action does the feedback relate to? Because we might have made done 100 actions, and then we get feedback at the end, but what for? What for exactly? So there are some challenges. It's not an easy task to solve. There are some other methods that can be used. For example, evolutionary algorithms, which means that there are different groups. For example, different teams are working on the same problem, and after they bring the solutions, then the solutions are tested, and you can compare which solutions are better. And in the next one, if there is a similar problem, then you focus on the solutions that perform best. So if you can compare different solutions, then you can use that. Also, we want to include expert knowledge, so that we don't need to start from scratch. But even bringing in expert knowledge is not that easy when it comes to the actual AI methods. So just generally, what can we do? How can we use it? Just to connect back to why it's important for conflict resolution is because we focus on the outcome. We focus on what actually benefits us, so we don't have a conflict about specific actions, but we try to avoid the conflicts are avoided by getting someone neutral, completely neutral, to suggest actions that actually benefits us. We measure how well we are, and that's objective. That's not subjective. It is subjective for a person, but the measurement in total is objective. So there could be a developmental phase where the AI learns from our decisions. Then there could be a trial phase after that, where the AI suggests an action, and we decide if we want to implement it. We can analyze it and see what goes. And the operational phase would then mean that an AI makes decision, and humans can intervene in emergencies. I think, I guess many people have seen different science fiction movies where they talk about, let's take iRobot as an example. In iRobot, the AI that is there takes over control and controls all the people and makes all decisions for them. And because the AI basically tells the people what is good for them. But it would be different if you do it the right way. If you use reinforcement learning, you still say what is good for you. That's the main measurement. And the AI is only used to find solutions to bring you there. But you still say what is good for you. Not like in those science fiction movies. Okay, again, for more information on decision making and artificial intelligence, and how to come to decisions without conflict. There will be more in the Future Leaders workshop that we are doing next in June. And if you are interested in artificial intelligence, how it works, more about all the science that's involved, there is a book online that's is a great source for that. So it says Artificial Intelligence Foundations of Computational Agents. An example for an agent is an autonomous robot. An agent is just someone who acts, or somewhat that acts. Okay, should we do another little break?
I was just thinking it was really interesting to see the mountain climbers voting. I'll be like, would Australians be able to use this instead of preferential voting? Because some people can't put, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down on the ballot paper. Would they be able to understand all this and say, okay, we'll go either 0 or 10 or somewhere in between here? It'll be interesting if they'll end up and say, oh, I don't mind. I mind least Casey is the Prime Minister. So well, we might. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think I don't know all the details, but what I've heard so far from the Australian election system, it is actually quite complicated.
Yeah.
And with this, at least, you would have one action, and you would still be able to say yes or no.
Yeah.
It's just you can't say more, but you could say yes or no.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, it's a good question. It needs to be tested. But this is like they are talking about politics more generally, but then they actually bring a specific example for a little group, so you can use it if you're working on a project with someone, you can use it as well as in a much bigger context.
Yeah, I think it kind of looks after what you think about everything else too, I suppose. Not just what you want. You're like, okay, well, I might like a little bit of this, and I like more of this. And I think it's interesting to see.
You get to really express more how you feel about a certain decision.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the most important elements are that you can vote for more. So I'm not opposed to 2 or 3 options. I don't really mind which ones of those. I don't really want to do that, but I don't mind those. And the second big element, I think, is that to see that the current state can be bad. So maybe no one wants how it is at the moment, but if you vote and then you need to discuss and then it doesn't bring out a result and then it needs to be discussed again, then nothing changes, and actually that's what people like.
It gets worse actually, because it's so huge. Nobody actually, when you go to politics, nobody actually understands policies, who stands for what and what they believe in and where their own ethics are at, and it's all sort of so far-fetched. What about like within the local community? Because what we eat in Brisbane or even in this community here as to the Gold Coast, it's very different. It's also different, so it should be sort of like maybe a representative of the smaller community kind of does something here with the community and make decisions and keep the money within the community as well. So there's some power. I think people so unempowered, is it? When power is taken away from everybody, it's just like it makes it all look like this big sort of a hoax. Sorry, but I can't think of it. I mean, I'm totally uninterested in voting. Completely. In fact, I don't vote. Well, I don't. And I don't know if it's good, bad or otherwise, but I don't know what a whole row of boxes and numbers and what it all means. I might be voting for the wrong guy. I mean, how do I know what this guy believes in and if it's of any value to me, because they never really tell you the truth.
And then do you really want to vote on a person, or would you prefer to vote on an action?
On an action. I would prefer to say, show me the glitz, and I don't care who you are. As long as it is for the betterment of everybody.
How nice your smile is.
Exactly.
It's irrelevant.
You know, it's sort of like I've seen the voting. I was born in Holland over there. Whoever gets the most vote wins. That's it. No giving an underhand sort of, you know, hey, I'll give you my votes if you sign this bit of paper. So to me, that's kind of like loses all the ethics and everything else about it. And it's never what they tell you, you know. So from this, there's so many other things.
When you talk about it, I just touched on minimum of opposition voting today, but I introduced this so-called disentangled federalism, which is much more than that, because it is about that one group should have the power for their own resources or decisions or actions or whatever. That's a big part of it.
I need to read a little bit more about that, and I really enjoyed that on the day in the city to see how that actually all kind of played out. It was very interesting.
Oh, with the vote on the movie.
It was great. I mean, in the end, it's about not having losers or winners, of making people feel they've missed out on anything. It's about what's the greater good, you know, what serves everybody, but maybe individuals aren't missing out either. Sort of, you know, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's all interesting. I have to read a little bit about this, what do you call that word?
Disentangled federalism.
Yes, that's it.
There is a book.
Entangled with it.
There is a book called Direct Democracy. I can look it up later, and I think the name it's De Boer and Verhulst, I think, but I'm not sure about the names exactly. The author. It's a European book, and it's mainly about the politics in the European Union. And it has case studies of local examples where direct democracy works. It talks about the different topics and how they are important, like how it's important to separate different topics from each other, for example. So even if you say something in this suburb here is completely different to something on the Gold Coast, it's even more than that, because something that's about a school here is different to something about a tunnel here. So it always depends what you are talking about. And this is this disentanglement that they, like, I got this word from that book. They are talking about.
I think it's fantastic, and it probably suits it. It's just a bit new to me right now.
Sounds good.
But it sounds good. And you know, changes are certainly needed, because that's why I think people are asleep, because they don't understand, so they don't care, and they're going this sort of like, what's that mode where you sort of
complacency?
Yes, that's it. You know, like, oh well, You know, it's going to be just another joker up there that starts off good and then soon the colours show through.